And welcome to Libertarian Counterpoint. I am your host, James Just, and with me is Mr. John Cameron, and author, of course. All right, John, back in New York, the United Federation of Teachers, there's a conversation of how much of these unions actually care about the students. Because what has happened here back in New York is there's a new law that requires a certain level of teacher-to-student ratio. But the way this law is written, what's actually going to happen is the students in low-performing schools already have that ratio. They already meet that ratio. It's students in the higher income, the higher performing schools who haven't felt the need to do this to reduce the class sizes because they're performing well, are now going to get more teachers. So they're not actually caring about teachers. They're just caring about about students. They care about teacher numbers, and I think that's one of these red flags when we say about these institutions.
You're surprised by this?
Oh no, I'm not surprised at all. But it is a red flag, and it's one of these things that I think we as a culture should be paying attention to. How these organizations who claim to care about students or you actually end up really just care about themselves.
Well, I think we could spend literally what do we got, like from the fields is going to take up, what, 5 minutes maybe? So we could spend 23 minutes just on this one subject and just talk about the LA school district. We wouldn't have to go to New York. When you said New York and United Federation of Teachers, I immediately knew we were going to hear something stupid and that it would hurt students. I mean, if teachers really wanted, were concerned about student performance, they would pay teachers according to the amount of curriculum taught and the improvement in performance of their students on standardized tests that I could write in like 5 minutes. Doesn't have to be complicated. Well, not 5 minutes, because I like to write well. A couple of days. From the beginning of the year to the end of the year, they'd pay teachers who teach more of the curriculum more than the less. They'd winnow out the bad teachers at the bottom, and they would celebrate the teachers at the top. But what they do is they base pay completely and totally on seniority and education. And somehow, if you've got a master's degree in beetle tracking or whatever it is, finger painting, you should be paid more. But there's no correlation between teachers having master's degree being better teachers. So if they really wanted the well-being of the students to be in front, then 60% of teachers in LA wouldn't be sending their kids to private schools. I mean, it's obviously all about the teachers. School's all about the teachers, and it should be all about the students, especially in California, especially in the blue states where the unions are so strong. Yeah.
If you really cared about the performance of students, you'd go to these good schools, you'd find those good teachers, and you'd ask, how much is it going to take me? How much is it going to cost me to get you to teach at these underperforming schools? How much is it going to cost me to get you to move, to go teach somewhere else?
It's not all about the money. They'd say, I wouldn't work there if you put a gun to my head.
And then you'd find out why.
Yeah, because they fear for their life.
But those are things you can actually change, right?
There's a school in Baltimore, we talked about it on our show a while ago, where none of the students were performing at grade level.
Not the school, Baltimore.
It's
the whole Baltimore, yeah,
the whole
none
city
of them.
Baltimore.
Yeah,
none of them. It was just at one school.
No, it was the whole Baltimore. It was ridiculous how underperforming they are.
How can that be? Are those teachers still getting paid?
Of course they are.
All right. Well, that's it. Just okay. We're not going to pay until the grades improve. I mean, I'm a capitalist, baby. Let's work it out. Pay for performance. If you can't teach kids how to read, I think we're going to talk about that too, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah, then what business you got being a teacher? And I don't want to care. I talk to teachers and they say, well, it's not like a factory. Yes, it is a factory. It's a knowledge factory. Put the same processes in place that anybody else who wants high performers does. Look at industries that turn out great product, right?
Well, if you're going to treat them as a factory, then you have to realize different students are different different products.
I know.
So some students will go into that high performing factory. You send them in there, you let them go. You let them go off and be doctors and teachers and engineers. Other students are going to be artists, and so you're going to go send them to a school that focuses on art and then uses that art to pump in, the education of history and the education of math.
I'm not saying that everybody needs to be taught the same way or the same curriculum. The idea that people need to go to college, what you've done by eliminating trade schools in this country is you have 180,000 machinist jobs wanting in this country. You got to import people from foreign countries to fix cars. You have that kind of problem, and there used to be a college degree had weight. And you were supposed to have an IQ in the 120th range. I guess 100 is average. Above average, not significantly above average, like med school. I'm not saying doctors are brilliant. Talk to one over coffee one day, you'll find out. But we've just thrown common sense out the window, and it's all because the people in power are not the students and the parents. They are the teachers who are part of a union. And this happens time and time and time again. Happens everywhere. And FDR, the great socialist, who went into office talking about how he's going to cut taxes and eliminate government waste and programs, he lied, by the way, folks. He said that government unions were an abomination and would lead to evil. And he said it, and he's a great socialist. So anyway, go ahead.
Well, he knew how the power structure.
I was on my podium there.
He knew how that power structure. He knew how the power structure was going to work. Yeah, he knew how it worked because he uses it.
Oh, he used it.
Yeah, so that's why he knew it worked. And we talk about what's not working. 2/3 of American kids can't read at grade level. And the reason is because they switched away from phonics. Now check this out, John. They took a study to figure this out. That phonics. That taking away phonics was going to reduce the ability of kids to read.
Well, no, they did it after the fact. They came up with this whole language thing. That doesn't work. And then they had it in place and ruined the lives of, I don't know how many.
2 generations.
Of kids, making it very difficult for them to learn to read. And then they did a study and said, oh, it's not working, but what actually worked better was phonics. But they knew that at the beginning of this thing. So was it their intent to ruin American civilization? Is that why they did that? It's that and masks.
The arrogance of science is what it was. You had this new scientific method that they thought in their own brains.
That's not science. That's an intellectual. There's a difference. Aldous Huxley said some ideas are so stupid that only intellectuals believe them. And
this is one of them. Yeah, this is one of them.
I mean, you could look at a study, and if it's scientifically valid, if the research is good, if the algorithm they chose is good, you can grind through the stats, and you can see that it's either a good or bad study. You look at population size, is it representative? This isn't actually rocket science, folks. You can plug all this stuff into a computer and figure out that this wasn't going to work 20 years ago. And so, again, some ideas are so stupid that only intellectuals believe them.
And the thing is, people did know 20 years ago. When they were trying to pass this, people were fighting against it, say, no, you're going against something that's proven to be working.
Well, they were railing against Bush, because Bush was, President Bush really pushed the whole basic, reading is fun. Remember reading is fundamental on Sesame Street?
Yeah.
Yeah, you probably remember that. You probably watched it. And before you quit watching TV, and everybody has known from day one how you teach kids to read.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is that you have a mother and a father, or two mothers or two fathers, or some combination of two people in the house, and at least a few nights a week they turn off the TV, they turn on some background music, and they sit and read. And then the kids watch their parents reading, and then they start reading. And if they don't know how to read, they ask their parents to help them. So.
Yeah, it's learning to take in information, which is what reading is. It's learning how to take in information in various forms. And, it is the most important skill as a human we can have. It's because if you cannot take in a wide variety of information, if you cannot, compare and contrast viewpoints and perspectives, and, facilitate new ideas into your head, and then dismiss the ones if they're bad, right? You can dismiss ideas that are bad. Just because you read a bad idea doesn't mean that you agree with it.
No.
That's skill.
A civilized mind can entertain a distasteful and abhorrent thought and not absorb it. I mean, that's part of having a mind. You got to be able to cipher, you got to be able to read, got to be able to speak. And if you can do that, you can be successful if you got some discipline. Yeah. So this is the typical, I'm guessing, left-wing psychobabble that's a bunch of people with PhDs in education came up with.
The arrogance of academia, right?
It's crazy, man.
And we want to talk about some more arrogance of academia. The White House. The White House actually condemned some university presidents. What was it? MIT,
Penn State?
Penn State and Princeton. Was it Princeton?
Or was it Harvard?
Harvard, Princeton. One of those big schools, right?
The ones that got grilled in front of the
congressional hearing. Yeah, because they were allowing anti-Semitism, clear anti-Semitism. Yeah. Calls for genocide.
Calls for genocide, and they were put on the spot and said, "Isn't that bullying?" And they wouldn't say yes. Let me ask you this question, folks, and I'm not. So the question they asked is, isn't teaching or letting people say, letting people call for the elimination of the Jewish people, wouldn't you call that bullying? And they were answering, oh, it depends on the context, and I can't answer in black. You just answer yes. Well, it depends on the context. I watched the clip. Did you watch the clips on this stuff? It was abhorrent. Apparently, they never read a history book. If you would have substituted the word Jew or Israel with the word trans or homosexual or black or immigrant,
yeah, they would have flipped out.
They would have flipped out. They would have been all over it. They would have been all over it. But since it's a class of people, 2% of the population of this country are Jewish, and they face 58% of the hate crimes. They were almost eliminated as I don't know if you call it race from the planet during the Holocaust. There was 5 million Jews in Poland before the Holocaust,
and that wasn't the first attempted Holocaust.
Let's be clear. There have been lots of attempts, yeah. And so you're going to forget that stuff. You're going to forget that kind of history, and let people run organizations where this kind of stuff happens. And, again, it's obviously anti-Semitism because, as I said, if you'd have put them on the spot and had them ask the question, would it be okay to call for the elimination of the black race, or the elimination of all trans people, or the elimination of all homosexuals, or how about the elimination of all liberals? They would have been all over it, and it would have been obviously wrong. So when I saw that, I was just steaming.
It's the hypocrisy. It's one thing if you kind of have that viewpoint over all of everybody. Okay, you may disagree with it, but hey, at least you're consistent. As these people are they're not even remotely consistent.
No,
they have their favorite. If you're on their favorite side, you can do no wrong. If you happen to go against their favorite side, you are all wrong. And so we live in that kind of strange world these days. Yeah. So anyway, we've got a message from Mr. Richard Fields this week again. So let's see what Richard has to say this week, and some from the fields.
Identified by the Irish Independent, a newspaper, as an immigrant from Algeria. Riots ensued. Some of the rioters were against immigration. The response of Irish politicians is to pass hate crime legislation, targeting not only individuals, but also social media for any, and I quote, offense of preparing or possessing material likely to incite violence or hatred against persons or account of their protected characteristics, end quote. Some of those characteristics are national or ethnic origin, as well as transgender and a gender other than those of male and female. In other words, hate crimes. Arson, robbery, assault, and crimes against property, all things that happened during the riot, are already against the law. The victims of those crimes suffer the same whether the motivation of the criminal was hate, affective altruism, or any other ideological motivation. Enhancing the penalty because of hate being a motivation does nothing to benefit the victim. The proposed laws would, however, significantly throttle freedom of the speech and press. That's because one of the key features of the bill says social media companies can avoid being held in violation of the proposed law by agreeing to regulation of their content by the Irish government. In short, giving the government of Ireland censorship authority. Of course, the social media companies are all global, so censorship by Ireland is de facto worldwide censorship. Is Ireland doing this on its own? Doubtful. The voluminous language of the Patriot Act in the U.S. was already written and sitting on the shelf, ready to be enacted in the case of a terrorist attack. 9/11 provided the excuse. Riots in Dublin, ostensibly linked to nationalistic Irish sentiments, are providing the excuse in this instance. There is no direct evidence, but I would say it's a safe bet that anti-free speech ideologues in Europe and the U.S. are being very helpful to the Irish politicians pushing this Orwellian legislation. In the years before internet, news with any possibility of mass dissemination was limited to 3 Federal Communications Commission regulated and controlled TV and radio networks, and a small handful of national newspapers, which were de facto controlled as well. When the internet made it possible for anyone with a Facebook or Twitter account to become their own news outlet with the capability of reaching millions, real free speech had a brief period in which to blossom. Politicians didn't like it. I remember Hillary Clinton publicly lamenting the internet for lacking the oversight that the government has over legacy mass media. The politicians are desperately trying to get that control back. Michael Schellenberger and Matt Taibbi and the other principals at Public are working hard to expose them and their government censorship complex. We wish them well. This is Richard Fields with Report from the Fields. See you next week.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Ed, that was, it's disturbing, right, when we find that how the government, who causes these problems in the first place because of their lacks of actions, are then going to use it as an excuse to clamp down on basic freedoms, have this freedom to speak freely. Right? It's again, we've talked about you don't have the right to harass somebody, but you do have a human right to protest, to tell the government and your community that, I don't like what you're doing. Now you don't have the right to burn things down while you're doing that.
Well, if it's your place, you can.
Oh yeah, you can burn down your own stuff.
If you want to actually, you probably can't, but there are rules against
environmental rules nowadays. Probably.
Toxic waste. Yeah.
Toxic waste. Fire without a permit is probably what you'll end up getting. But yeah, it is disturbing how far we have gone down this Orwellian path and how rapidly so many people have cheered it on.
Well, what's disturbing, because I pay attention to Public. I subscribe to Schellenberger on Substack, and the layers and the what's the word I'm looking for? The convoluted nature of and the constant denying and lying by these some of these organizations that are helping do the censorship are actually NGOs that are paid by government grants. And you can't tell whether people work for the government or private industry. This DiResta woman, who does she work for, of the Stanford Internet, whatever it's called? I mean, but it's the idea that I think over 50% of college students think that it's okay to shout down somebody with an opposing viewpoint. Let you know that these crazy lunatic socialists who, socialism has failed repeatedly and forever everywhere on the planet except for in universities where ideas that don't work are promoted and you become a tenured professor and they can't get rid of you, and then they give you a Nobel Prize. Okay. Because the Nobel organization's also been perverted. It's basically lefties given awards to lefties. So the idea that it is so pervasive and so deep and so, it's like an octopus, you know? And with more than just whatever, how many are, what does octopus have, 8 legs?
Yeah.
I don't know. 8 legs?
Yeah, and unlimited,
Kinda
yeah,
like
there's
spider?
tentacles
it's like
all everywhere.
Unlimited number. And you chop one off and another one, and then no, that's not my leg. Yeah, that's not my rope that's hanging you from that tree. So it's horrible. And the idea that some people think it's okay, and they think it's okay when they're in power.
Yeah, until it comes to them.
If
That's
they
the
were
thing.
out of power and they couldn't be heard, there'd be rioting in the streets.
Yeah, that's the thing. They think they have a right to shut down people who they disagree with. But if those people who they disagree with went to shout them down, all of a sudden you don't have a right to do that. Right? That's how it works for them. So it's what's good for me, but not for thee, right? That type of thing. And talk about good for thee and not for thee. We've got California. The California governor and legislature are suing to keep a legitimate ballot measure off the ballot because it's going to make them passing taxes too hard. That's the excuse. They're suing to keep a ballot measure that the controller, Secretary of State has certified as a ballot. It's a legitimate ballot measure, so it has enough signatures to be on the ballot. Yes, but the California legislature doesn't want it on the ballot because they think it's going to pass.
And it's going to make it too hard to raise taxes.
Too hard for local governments to raise taxes.
Repeatedly, Californians they might talk the big high tax, high spend game, but every time they are offered the opportunity to limit spending by the government and to limit taxes by the government, they do so. Now they vote for tiny little local incremental increases in tax, which is crazy because eventually, I mean, I don't remember when local tax started being a thing, but it used to be 0. And now in Sacramento, it's 8.5%, or 8.75%. It's approaching 9%
sales tax. Yeah,
approaching 9%. What do they do with that money? I mean, Sacramento itself the county of Sacramento has, I don't know what, 500,000 people in it, 600,000 people in it?
I don't remember.
Something like
I think we're over 1 million in the county. We're well over 1 million.
In the county?
Yeah.
And they got like 6,000 employees or something like that.
I
It's
don't
a crazy
know.
number. What do they all do? What do they spend this money on? It's not on streets. It's not preventing crime. It's not doing anything about homelessness.
Well, they're spending a lot of money on homelessness.
Well, no, it's not doing anything about it. I didn't say it's not. They're not spending the money. It's just they're not doing anything about it.
Yeah. Oh well, they are. They're doing something about it.
No,
they're keeping it going so they can feed their
bureaucracies
so they can feed the machine.
Consultants and
Yeah. Oh,
get
yeah.
more votes and
All those people who are connected to.
That's why they won't fix the water problem. Because, well, although Newsom must really want to get elected president because he finally approved a reservoir that should have been approved like 40 years ago that'll really, really help.
Yeah.
But I still don't think they'll ever get built.
Well, there is. What's funny is that Newsom is now like just like Jerry Brown was somehow the conscience, the rational part of the Democrat Party. Yeah. Now the Democrat Party has gone so far left that Newsom is seen as the rational section of the California Democrat Party. Newsom is the rational one. You understand how absolutely bizarre that is?
Well, that's just, and then what the left says is that the radical right has taken over the Republican Party. That's like Rice calling Snow White. I mean, that's just crazy, man. The radicals in the Democratic Party, AOC and the Squad, the lunatic environmentalists. I mean, I go out in nature every day, folks. I love, there's a camera over there. My back hurts, which is why I'm moving like this. Go out in nature every day. I love nature. I bought my house because it's got a nice view of the American River. Not an expensive house. I'm not a rich man. Hear that, IRS? I'm not. I love the environment. But the idea that you slap a label of green environmental on something, and then it lets you do any lunatic thing you want, that is counterintuitive and unscientific, is crazy. So, you know, it's the idea that this man, Newsom, who I don't think even has a moral compass, is somehow now he's looked down upon by the liberal elites in the Democratic Party. That's crazy.
Remember, this is the Democrat Party that a couple of years ago said Dianne Feinstein was too far right. So this is how far left they've gone. And so, you know, when you're that far left, of course everything's going to seem far right to you. And hey, I'll admit the Republican Party has gone far right. It's just the Democrat Party has no room to talk, is kind of our thing. Now we look at this and we've got our nice little picture of our Christmas tree here. And, you know, what Newsom did the other day is we had the California tree lighting and they didn't show up because he was afraid that the protesters were going to come and disrupt the event. So rather than worry about protesters disrupting the event, they canceled the event. And they kind of lit the tree just remotely with no ceremony, no circumstance.
No. Yeah. So he's.
So he's essentially decided that, you know, I can't, since the left-wing protesters can't be held off. You know, if those were MAGA protesters, they would have blocked off the streets, forced them to be the outside, and they would have gone on and had the ceremony.
Oh, yeah. And they would have shot a couple of them and thrown them in jail for
if need be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. But because they're leftoing protesters, they're just going to cancel the event and quietly pretend that they didn't. Is essentially what has happened.
So he can't, the lefty can't protect the people of California and himself from the lefties.
Yes.
Huh.
It's essentially what is what that has admitted. And the thing is,
I refuse to call them liberals anymore, because if you look up the classic definition of liberal, it ain't what we got going on, folks. It's people who value individual freedom, and that's not this group of people. These are people who would think that Mao Zedong's 58 million people killed was just a start.
Yep.
You know?
And we are out of time tonight, John. Thank you for being with me. Thank you for watching. Have a very Merry Christmas and good night. And please remember to love everybody.
Love everybody. And just ignore all the bad stuff we talked about and have a great Christmas.
Yeah. Have a great Christmas.
Why not?
Good night.